The auction block smelled like old wood and dried blood. Clara could feel the splinters through her worn boots as she stood there, hands tied in front of her swollen belly, trying not to shake. The rope bit into her wrists. Her father stood 10 feet away with his back to her, jaw set like iron, refusing to meet her eyes. He hadn't looked at her in 3 months. Not since the morning she told him the truth. The town square was packed. Red Hollow didn't get much entertainment, and a public shaming was better than a traveling show. Women clutched their shawls and whispered behind gloved hands. Men leaned against posts with arms crossed, faces carved from stone in judgment. Children peeked between their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed and confused. "Let's get this done," her father said. His voice carried across the square like a whip crack. "I got a daughter here, 18 years old, healthy, can cook, clean, sew. She's made a mistake, but she's strong stock. Someone takes her off my hands. The child too, when it comes. I wash my hands of the whole mess." Clara's throat closed. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. A man near the front spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "What kind of man sells his own blood?" "The kind that won't have a whore under his roof," her father shot back. His face was red, veins standing out on his neck. "She made her bed. Now someone else can deal with it." The word whore hit like a fist. Clara flinched, felt the baby shift inside her. She pressed her bound hands against her belly, a useless gesture of protection. "Who's the father?" someone called out. "Doesn't matter," her father said. "He's gone. Lit out 2 months ago when she told him. That tells you everything you need to know about him. And about her." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara wanted to scream that it wasn't like that Thomas had promised her everything, that he'd kissed her under the cottonwood tree and said he'd build her a house, that they'd get married come spring, that he loved her more than his own life. But Thomas was gone, rode out in the middle of the night without a word, and when she went to his family's homestead, his mother looked at her like she was something scraped off a boot. "So what are you asking?" This from a thick-shouldered man Clara recognized as Dutch Carver, who ran the livery. He had mean eyes and hands that looked like they knew their way around a bottle and a belt. Her father scratched his jaw. "I ain't asking nothing. I'm taking offers. Highest bid takes her." "You can't be serious, Martin." Mrs. Brennan stepped forward, clutching her Bible. She was one of the few women in town who'd ever shown Clara kindness. "This is your daughter, your grandchild." "Was my daughter," Martin Whitlock said. "She stopped being mine when she spread her legs for a coward." Mrs. Brennan recoiled like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, closed it, then stepped back into the crowd. No one else spoke up. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't hope. That had died weeks ago. It was something deeper. The last fragile thread connecting her to the idea that someone might care. "I'll give you $20, Dutch Carver said. "30, said another voice, Cal Meeks, who owned the saloon. He was looking at Clara the way a man looks at a horse he's thinking of buying. Calculating. Cold. "She ain't worth 30, someone muttered. 35, Carver countered. Clara's legs started to shake. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her terror. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Her father had made sure of that. He'd locked her in the root cellar for 2 days before this, only letting her out an hour ago to clean up and put on the one decent dress she owned. It hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight everywhere except her belly. 40, Meeks said. The bidding continued. Clara stopped listening to the numbers. She stared at the mountains in the distance, dark and jagged against the sky. She'd never been up there. Her father said only fools and outlaws lived in those peaks, that the land was cursed, that men went up and didn't come back. Right now, cursed sounded better than this. $60, Dutch Carver said. Final offer. That's more than she's worth, and we all know it. Sold 500. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and rough like gravel scraping metal. Every head turned. A man stood at the edge of the square, half in shadow. Tall. Taller than anyone Clara had ever seen. He wore a long dark coat that looked like it had seen weather and worse, and his hat was pulled low enough that she couldn't make out his face. But she could feel his eyes on her, could feel the weight of them like a physical thing. The crowd parted as he walked forward. No one spoke. No one moved. "Who the hell are you?" Martin Whitlock demanded. The man stopped a few feet from the platform. He tilted his head up, and Clara caught a glimpse of his face. Hard angles. A scar running from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. Eyes that looked like they'd seen the bottom of something dark and crawled back out. Elias Vorn, he said. The name hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Women gasped. Men stepped back. Mrs. Brennan crossed herself. Clara had heard the name. Everyone had. Elias Vorn was the ghost story mothers told their children, the man who lived up in the high country where the air was thin and the law didn't reach. People said he'd killed men, that he was crazy, that he'd lost his mind after something happened up in those mountains, something no one talked about but everyone whispered. You got no business here, Vorn, her father said, but his voice shook. You're selling, Elias said. I'm buying, $500, cash. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick roll of bills, dropped it on the platform. The money landed with a heavy thud. Martin Whitlock stared at it. Claire could see the war happening behind his eyes, greed fighting with fear. That's blood money, someone hissed. Money's money, her father said. He bent down, picked up the roll, thumbed through it. His hands trembled. It's all here. Then we're done, Elias said. Wait. Claire's voice came out hoarse. Everyone looked at her. She looked at Elias Vorn, at the stranger who'd just bought her like a sack of grain. Why? He met her eyes, held them. She couldn't read anything in his face. Does it matter? He asked. Yes. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, You need a way out. I need someone who can work. That's the deal. I ain't... Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, tried again. I ain't gonna be... You'll have your own room, Elias said, cutting her off. Lock on the inside. You don't want me near you, you turn that lock and I won't touch it. But you'll work. You'll earn your keep. And when that baby comes, it's yours to raise. I won't lay a hand on either of you unless you try to run or try to hurt me. Those are my terms. Clara stared at him. The crowd was silent, holding its breath. And if I say no? Elias glanced at Dutch Carver, then at Cal Meeks. His meaning was clear. Clara looked at her father. Martin Whitlock was pocketing the money, his face hard and distant. He'd already walked away from her in every way that mattered. This was just making it official. She thought about Thomas, about the promises that turned to ash, about the town that would tear her apart the moment Elias Vorn left without her. Untie me, she said. Elias stepped up onto the platform. He moved like a predator, all coiled strength and barely restrained violence. He pulled a knife from his belt, a big, ugly thing with a worn handle, and cut through the ropes in one swift motion. Clara rubbed her wrists. The skin was raw and red. You got anything you need from here? Elias asked. She thought about her room in her father's house, the bed she'd slept in since she was a child, the quilt her mother had made before the fever took her, the few dresses hanging in the warped armoire. No, she said. There's nothing here. Elias nodded. He turned to the crowd. Anyone got a problem with this? No one spoke. No one moved. He looked at Martin Whitlock. Your daughter's debt is paid. You come looking for her, you'll regret it. We clear? Martin's jaw worked. He wanted to say something. Clara could see it. But he was a coward under all that bluster, and Elias Vorn was the kind of man who made cowards remember why they were afraid. Clear, her father finally said. Elias held out his hand to Clara. She looked at it, calloused, scarred, broad enough to crush bone, and hesitated. I won't hurt you, he said quietly. I give you my word. Clara didn't believe in words anymore, but she also didn't have a choice. She took his hand. His grip was steady, careful. He helped her down from the platform. Let's go, he said. They walked through the crowd. People pressed back like they were contagious. No one said goodbye. No one wished her well. Clara didn't look back. Tiag. Elias Vorn had a horse tied up at the edge of town, a big roan mare with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down. Can you ride? He asked. I can sit a horse, Clara said. Good enough. He pulled her up behind him. Clara settled as best she could with her belly in the way, wrapping her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. He felt solid as stone under her grip. The mare started walking, and Red Hollow fell away behind them. Clara watched the town shrink into the distance. The square where they'd tried to erase her. The church where she'd been baptized. The schoolhouse where she'd learned to read. The general store where she used to buy peppermint sticks with her mother. All of it gone now. Might as well have burned to ash. "You hungry?" Elias asked after they'd been riding for an hour. "Yes," Clara admitted. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything substantial. He reached into his saddlebag without slowing the horse and pulled out a cloth bundle. Unwrapped it one-handed and passed her a thick piece of cornbread and some dried venison. Clara ate without tasting it. Her stomach was a knot of fear and exhaustion, but the baby needed food, so she forced it down. "How far?" she asked. 6 hours if we don't stop. You need to stop. You tell me." "I'll be fine." He didn't respond. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher and the land changed around them. The flat scrubland gave way to foothills, then to steeper terrain dotted with pine and aspen. The air got colder, thinner. Clara's back started to ache. Her thighs burned from gripping the horse. But she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't change anything. "Why'd you come down?" she asked eventually. "To town." "Needed supplies." "You could have gotten supplies without buying a pregnant girl." Elias was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah," he finally said. "I could have." "So why?" "Saw what they were doing to you," he said. "Didn't sit right." "You don't even know me." "Don't have to." Clara didn't know what to make of that. She'd spent her whole life in a town where everyone knew everyone's business, where reputation was currency and shame was a weapon. The idea that someone would help her without wanting something, without knowing her family history or judging her mistakes, it didn't make sense. "People say you killed a man," she said. "People say a lot of things." "Did you?" Elias didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was flat. "Yeah, I did." Clara's grip tightened reflexively on his coat. "Why?" He needed killing. That should have scared her. Maybe it would have a few months ago. But Clara had learned something in the past weeks. Monsters came in all shapes. Her father looked respectable. Thomas had looked kind. The men bidding on her in that square looked like upstanding citizens. Sometimes the monster was the one who saved you. "You gonna kill me?" she asked. "No." "How do I know that?" Elias tilted his head slightly, as if considering. "You don't," he said. "But if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have paid $500 for the privilege. I'd have just waited for Carver or Meeks to get hold of you, and done it then." It was a cold kind of logic, but it was also true. "What if I try to leave?" Claire asked. "Then you leave." "Just like that?" "It's a long walk back to Red Hollow," Elias said. "And winter's coming. You want to try it? That's your choice. But I won't stop you." Clara didn't believe him. Men didn't work that way. Men didn't spend $500 on something and then let it walk away. But she didn't have the energy to argue, so she stayed quiet and watched the mountains grow closer. They reached Elias Vaughn's cabin as the sun was starting to dip toward the western peaks. It was bigger than Clara expected. Not a shack or a lean-to, but an actual structure, log walls, solid roof, stone chimney. It sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pines, with a creek running about 50 yards away. There was a small barn, a chicken coop, a root cellar dug into the hillside. "This is it," Elias said. He dismounted, then helped Clara down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. She grabbed the saddle to steady herself. "Easy," Elias said. He didn't touch her, but he stayed close in case she fell. Clara breathed through the dizziness until it passed. "I'm fine." He nodded and led the mare toward the barn. Clara followed, looking around. The place was neat, organized. The woodpile was stacked proper. The tools hung where they belonged. It looked like someone lived here who gave a damn about keeping things in order. Inside the barn, Elias unsaddled the mare and brushed her down with practiced efficiency. Clara watched, unsure what to do with herself. "You know anything about horses?" he asked. "A little. My father had a plow horse." "You'll learn more here. Can't survive up here without knowing how to handle animals." When he was done, he showed her the chicken coop, 8 hens and a rooster. Then the root cellar, which was stocked with potatoes, carrots, onions, salted meat, jars of preserved vegetables. You won't starve, Elias said. I hunt most of what we eat. You'll help with the rest. What rest? Garden come spring, chickens year-round, cooking, cleaning, mending. Same stuff you did before, just more of it. Clara nodded. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. Come on, Elias said. I'll show you inside. The cabin was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth and the smell of wood smoke and pine filled the air. The main room was simple. A table, 2 chairs, a bench by the fire, shelves lined with supplies. A doorway led to another room in the back. That's yours, Elias said, nodding toward the door. Bed, dresser, wash basin. I'll bring you blankets and a pillow. There's a bolt on the inside. Use it. Clara walked to the door, pushed it open. The room was small but clean. A narrow bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the trees, and on the inside of the door, exactly like he'd said, was an iron bolt. She turned back to look at him. Where do you sleep? Out here, Elias said. Got a bedroll by the fire. That's it? That's it. Clara wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand the catch, the trap, the thing he wasn't saying, but exhaustion was crashing over her like a wave, and the baby was pressing heavy on her bladder, and her feet hurt so bad she wanted to cry. I need to lie down, she said. Go ahead, I'll bring you food in a bit. She nodded and retreated into the small room, closed the door, stared at the bolt for a long moment, then slid it home with a heavy clunk. The sound of it locking felt like the first safe thing she'd heard in months. Clara sank onto the bed. The mattress was thin but clean, stuffed with straw that rustled under her weight. She pulled off her boots and lay back, one hand on her belly. The baby kicked, a strong, insistent thump against her ribs. I know, Clara whispered. I don't know where we are either. She closed her eyes, tried not to think about her father's face, about Thomas's promises, about the crowd watching her stand on that platform like a criminal awaiting execution. Outside, she could hear Elias moving around, the sound of wood being chopped, water being pumped. Normal sounds, almost peaceful. Clara didn't trust it, but she was too damn tired to fight anymore. So she let herself drift, one hand still pressed against the life growing inside her, and tried to believe that maybe, she'd survive this after all. She woke to a knock on the door. Yeah? Her voice was thick with sleep. Got food, Elias said through the wood. I'm setting it outside the door. Clara sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her back. All right. She heard footsteps retreating, waited a moment, then unbolted the door and cracked it open. A plate sat on the floor. Beans, cornbread, a piece of fried salt pork. Steam rose off it. Clara picked it up and brought it back to the bed. Ate slowly, savoring each bite. It was simple food, but it was hot and there was enough of it. That alone felt like a luxury. When she finished, she set the plate aside and lay back down. Through the walls, she could hear Elias moving around. The clink of dishes, the creak of the floorboards. But he didn't approach her door again. Clara pulled the blanket up to her chin. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window. She could hear the pine swaying, the distant cry of something wild. This was her life now. A cabin in the mountains with a man she didn't know. A man who'd bought her like property but promised her freedom. A man the whole town feared. Clara didn't know if that made her lucky or damned. But for the first time in months, she wasn't standing on an auction block. She wasn't tied up or locked in a cellar. She wasn't staring at a father who looked at her like she was garbage. That had to count for something. She pressed her hand to her belly, felt the baby shift under her palm. We're going to be okay, she whispered into the dark. We're going to figure this out. She didn't believe it yet. But maybe, if she said it enough times, she would. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of an axe biting wood. She lay still for a moment, disoriented in the gray light filtering through the window. The room smelled like pine and cold air. Her back ached from the thin mattress, and the baby was pressing hard against her bladder. She pushed herself up with a grunt and shuffled to the chamber pot in the corner. Outside, the rhythmic thunk, thunk, thunk of the axe continued without pause. When she emerged from her room, the main cabin was empty. The fire had burned down to coals. Clara added wood from the stack beside the hearth and coaxed it back to life, her hands clumsy with cold. She found a pot hanging on a hook, filled it with water from the pump outside, and set it to boil. The chickens were making noise in their coop. Clara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and went out to check on them. The morning air bit at her face, sharp and clean. Frost covered everything in a thin white layer that crunched under her boots. Elias was splitting wood about 30 yards from the cabin. He'd already built a considerable pile. His coat was off despite the cold, sleeves rolled up, and sweat darkened his shirt. He worked with mechanical precision, each swing of the axe landing exactly where he intended. He saw her, but didn't stop working. Clara gathered eggs from the coop, moving slowly, her belly making everything awkward. 8 eggs. She carried them back inside in her skirt, careful not to crack them. By the time Elias came in, she had bacon frying and coffee brewing. He stopped in the doorway, looking at the stove with something like surprise on his face. "Didn't have to do that," he said. "You said I'd work for my keep." Clara cracked eggs into the pan. "This is work." He grunted and poured himself coffee from the pot, drank it black standing by the fire. Clara could feel him watching her but didn't turn around. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. "A gun?" "Yeah. My father taught me when I was 12. Rifle shooting. I'm decent enough." "Good. After breakfast, I'll show you where I keep things. You need to know how to defend yourself up here." Clara flipped the eggs. "From what?" "Bears, mostly. Mountain lions, if you're unlucky. Men, if you're real unlucky." She served the food on 2 tin plates and set them on the table. Elias sat down without ceremony and ate like a man who'd been working hard for hours. Clara picked at her own food, her stomach still adjusting to regular meals. "There are rules I should know?" she asked. Elias looked up from his plate. "Don't go wandering off alone until you know the land. Don't waste water or food. Don't leave the rifle loaded inside the cabin. And if I tell you to do something quick, you do it first and ask questions later. Up here, hesitation gets you killed." "That it?" "That's it." "What about you?" Clara asked. "You got rules?" He chewed slowly, considering. "I don't go in your room unless you invite me. I don't touch you unless you want it. And I don't lie to you, even if the truth's ugly." Clara met his eyes across the table. "Why would I ever want you to touch me?" Something flickered in his expression, pain maybe, or recognition. "You wouldn't," he said. "That's the point." They finished eating in silence. Elias showed her where he kept the rifle, a Winchester repeater, well-maintained, and the ammunition. He took her outside and had her practice loading and unloading until she could do it without fumbling. "Your hands are shaking," he observed. "I'm tired." "You're scared." Clara's jaw tightened. "So what if I am?" "Nothing wrong with scared," Elias said. "But up here, scared gets you eaten. You need to be able to shoot even when your hands are shaking, especially then." He set up a target, a piece of wood with a charcoal circle drawn on it, and had her fire at it. The first shot went wide, the second hit the edge, sent it to web. By the 5th, she was consistently hitting near center. "You'll do," Elias said. He took the rifle back and cleaned it with efficient movements. "You feel something's wrong, you grab this and you shoot. Don't wait to see what it is, don't hesitate. Up here, things that want to hurt you, don't give warnings." Clara nodded. Her shoulder hurt from the rifle's kick, and her ears were ringing, but she felt steadier than she had in months. Having a weapon in her hands, knowing she could use it, that was power. Small power, maybe. But it was hers. The days took on a rhythm after that. Clara woke early, tended the chickens, made breakfast. Elias would already be working, chopping wood, hunting, checking traps, repairing things that needed fixing. He moved through the world like a man who'd forgotten how to be still. Clara worked too. She swept floors, washed dishes, mended clothes, organized supplies. Her body protested every movement. Her back ached constantly now, and the baby seemed to press on every organ at once. But she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering Red Hollow and the auction block and her father's face. Some days Elias barely spoke. He'd come in for meals, eat in silence, then disappear again until dark. Other days he'd talk while they worked, teaching her about the land, which plants were safe to eat, how to read animal tracks, where the creek ran too fast to cross. "You grew up here?" Clara asked one afternoon. She was sitting on the porch shelling peas while Elias sharpened tools beside her. "Not here exactly, about 10 miles south. My father had a homestead. What happened to it? Burned down. His whetstone scraped across metal in long, even strokes. Him with it. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a bastard. Clara glanced at him. His face was unreadable. Mine too, she said quietly. Elias paused in his sharpening. Yeah, I figured. That why you bought up me? Part of it. What's the other part? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. I spent 5 years down in civilization. Tried to make it work. Got married even. Thought I could be normal if I just tried hard enough. Clara's hand stilled on the peas. What happened? She died. Fever took her in 3 days. After that, I came back up here and stayed. How long ago? 4 years. Clara looked at him, really looked. The scar on his face, the hard lines around his mouth, the way he held himself like a man who'd stopped expecting good things. She the one who taught you to cook? Clara asked. Elias almost smiled. Almost. Yeah, she said I'd starve if she didn't. She was probably right. What was her name? Sarah. The name hung in the air between them. Clara went back to shelling peas and Elias went back to his sharpening, and neither of them said anything more. That night, Clara lay in her narrow bed and thought about Sarah. About a woman who'd loved Elias Vorn enough to marry him, who'd taught him to cook, who died before she could finish whatever life they'd started building. She wondered if Sarah had been scared of him at first, too. A week passed, then 2. Clara's belly grew heavier. Moving became harder. Some mornings she could barely get out of bed, and Elias would leave breakfast on a plate outside her door without comment. He was teaching her other things now. How to skin a rabbit, how to preserve meat, how to tell if the creek was going to flood by the sound of it. She learned fast because she had to. Up here, weakness was a luxury no one could afford. You ever been down the mountain? Clara asked one morning. They were working in the garden plot, turning soil for spring planting even though the ground was still half frozen. Town, you mean? Yeah. Once every few months, get supplies, trade pelts. He drove the shovel into the earth with his boot. Don't stay long. Because they're scared of you. Because I don't like being around people. But you brought me here. Elias stopped digging and leaned on the shovel. That's different. How? You didn't have a choice. Neither did I. Clara frowned. What's that mean? He looked at her for a long moment, something working behind his eyes. Means I saw you standing on that platform. And I saw myself 10 years ago. Saw someone who'd been chewed up by people who were supposed to protect them. And I couldn't walk away from that. That's not a reason. That's a feeling. Maybe. He went back to digging. But it's the only one I got. Clara didn't push. She'd learned that about Elias. He'd talk when he was ready, and pushing just made him close up tighter than a sealed jar. That afternoon, while Elias was checking his trap line, Clara decided to wash clothes in the creek. Her dresses were filthy, and the smell of smoke and sweat clung to everything. She hauled water and soap down to the bank, where a calm eddy made a natural washing pool. The water was brutally cold. Her hands went numb within minutes, but it felt good to be doing something normal, something that didn't involve fear or survival or wondering when the other boot would drop. She was scrubbing her spare dress against a rock when she heard voices. Clara froze, looked up. 2 men were coming through the trees on the opposite bank, about 50 yards downstream. They hadn't seen her yet. Told you this was the place, one was saying. He was thin and wiry, with a face like a ferret. Vorn's place, you mean? The second man was bigger, with a thick beard and a rifle slung across his back. Yeah, Dutch said he's got that girl up here. The whore from Red Hollow. Clara's blood turned to ice. Dutch is an idiot, the bearded man said. Why would Vorn want her? Who knows? Maybe he's tired of his hand. The thin man laughed, a nasty sound. But Dutch thinks if we can get her back, her old man might pay to keep things quiet. Save face, you know. And if Vorn won't give her up, then we take her anyway. What's he going to do? He's one man. They were moving parallel to the creek now, heading upstream toward the cabin. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around wildly. The rifle was back at the cabin. She had nothing but a bar of soap and a wet dress. The men disappeared into the trees. Clara dropped the washing and ran. She moved as fast as her pregnant body would allow, one hand pressed to her belly, feet slipping on wet rocks. Her lungs burned. The baby pressed down hard, making every step agony, but she kept moving. She reached the cabin and burst through the door. Empty. Elias was still out on the trap line. She grabbed the rifle from its place on the wall, checked that it was loaded, and positioned herself by the window. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun. The minutes crawled by. Clara's ears strained for any sound. The baby kicked frantically as if sensing her terror. Then she heard it. Footsteps on the porch. The creak of a board. "Girl," a voice called out, the thin man. "We know you're in there. We just want to talk." Clara didn't answer. She raised the rifle, bracing it against the window frame. "Your daddy sent us," the voice continued. "He's real worried about you, wants to make sure you're all right." Liar. Her father didn't care if she was alive or dead. "Come on out. We'll take you back safe. No one's got to get hurt." Clara's finger found the trigger. She'd never shot a person before. Wasn't sure she could, but the alternative was going back to Red Hollow, and she'd rather die. The door rattled, someone testing the latch. "Don't be stupid, girl. Vorn ain't here to protect you. Just open up and this goes easy." The door rattled harder. They were going to kick it in. Clara aimed at the door and fired. The shot exploded through the cabin, deafening. Wood splintered. Someone outside yelped. "She shot at us! The crazy bitch shot at us!" Clara worked the lever, chambered another round. Her ears were ringing. Smoke hung in the air. "You got one chance!" she shouted, shocked by how steady her voice sounded. "You walk away now or the next one ain't a warning." "You think you can take both of us?" the bearded man called. "I got 12 rounds," Clara said. "I only need 2. Silence. She could hear them talking outside, too low to make out words. Then footsteps moving away, fast. Clara didn't lower the rifle. She stood there, shaking, sweating despite the cold, until the sound of their retreat faded completely. Only then did she let herself sink to the floor, back against the wall, rifle across her lap. She was still sitting there when Elias came back. He took in the scene immediately, the splintered door, the smoke, Clara on the floor with the rifle. His face went hard as stone. "What happened?" Clara told him. Everything. The men at the creek. What they'd said. How they'd tried to get in. Elias crouched in front of her, eyes searching her face. "They touch you?" "No, I shot before they got in." "Good." He took the rifle gently from her hands and set it aside. "You did good." "They said my father sent them." "Maybe he did. Maybe Dutch Carver did. Doesn't matter." Elias stood. "They know where you are now. They'll come back with more men." Terror spiked through her. "What do we do?" "We prepare." He helped her to her feet. "And we make sure they think twice before trying again." Over the next 3 days, Elias turned the cabin into a fortress. He reinforced the door with iron bars. He built shutters for the windows that could be latched from inside. He stocked the cabin with water, ammunition, and dried food. He set traps in the woods around the clearing, nasty things with teeth that could break a man's leg. Clara watched him work with something like awe. He moved with purpose, wasting no motion, thinking 3 steps ahead. This was a man who'd survived, who knew how to fight when the world came for him. "You've done this before," she said. "Yeah." "When?" Elias hammered another nail into the door frame. "Long time ago. Different men. Same situation." "What happened?" "They stopped coming." He didn't elaborate. Clara didn't ask. On the 4th day, Elias started teaching her to fight. Not shooting, she could shoot well enough, but hand to hand. What to do if someone got close, how to use her weight, where to hit to make it count. "You're pregnant," he said. "That makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you dangerous. Someone grabs you, you don't think. You just hurt them bad enough to get away." He showed her. How to break a grip, how to gouge eyes, how to stomp a knee, how to use her elbow like a weapon. "This ain't fair fighting," Elias said. "Fair fighting's for men with nothing to lose. You got everything to lose. So you fight dirty and you fight mean and you don't stop until they're down or you're free. Understand?" Clara nodded, breathing hard. "I understand." They practiced until her arms trembled and sweat soaked through her dress, until the moves started to feel automatic, until Elias grabbed her from behind and she dropped her weight, drove her elbow back and broke his grip without thinking. "Better," he said. Again. That night, Clara's whole body ached. She lay in bed with her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move. 7 months now, maybe 8. She'd lost track. "We're fighters," she whispered to the life inside her. "Both of us." The baby kicked, hard. Clara closed her eyes. She could hear Elias moving in the main room, checking the door for the 10th time, adding wood to the fire, keeping watch. For the first time since she'd arrived, Clara didn't lock the bolt on her door. She couldn't have said why. Maybe because Elias had kept every promise he'd made. Maybe because she was tired of being afraid. Or maybe because somewhere in the past weeks, he'd stopped being the monster from the stories and started being the man who'd given her soap, taught her to shoot, and reinforced the doors so she could feel safe. Whatever the reason, the bolt stayed open. A week passed. Then 2. No one came. Clara started to breathe easier. Started to think maybe they'd scared Dutch and his men off for good. Started to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she could build a life here. Then one morning, she woke to voices outside. Not 2 men this time. 5. Maybe 6. Claire grabbed the rifle and moved to the window. Elias was already there, looking out through a gap in the shutters. His face was carved from granite. "Stay back from the windows," he said quietly. "How many?" 6. Carver's with them. So's your father." Claire's stomach dropped. "He came?" "Yeah." Elias checked his rifle. "He came." Martin Whitlock's voice boomed across the clearing. "Vorn, send my daughter out. This doesn't have to get ugly." Elias didn't answer. "I know you're in there. I got 6 men with me. You got 1 rifle. Don't be stupid." Clara moved beside Elias, looked through the gap. There they were. Her father in front, jaw set, looking righteous and angry. Dutch Carver beside him, rifle in hand. 4 other men she recognized from town, ranch hands, drifters, the kind who'd do anything for whiskey money. "We just want the girl," Dutch called. "You keep the money. We all walk away clean." "They're not walking away," Elias said softly. "Not this time." He moved to the door, started unbarring it. "What are you doing?" Clara hissed. "Ending this." He looked at her, and his eyes were terrible. "Whatever happens, you stay inside. You hear shooting, you bar this door and you don't open it for anyone but me. Understand?" "Elias, do you understand?" "Yes." He nodded once. Then he opened the door and stepped outside. Clara rushed back to the window, watched as Elias walked into the clearing, rifle held loose in one hand. He looked calm, almost relaxed. "Martin," he said. "Dutch, didn't expect to see you boys up here." "We came for the girl," Martin said. "She's my daughter. You got no right keeping her." "She's not a prisoner," Elias said. "She can leave any time she wants." "Then send her out." "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Elias raised his voice slightly. "Clara, you want to go with them?" Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She could see her father's face, see the other men shifting their weight, hands drifting toward weapons. She thought about Red Hollow, about the auction block, about being sold like cattle while the whole town watched. She thought about the cabin, the rifle in her hands, the way Elias had taught her to fight and shoot and survive. "No!" she shouted through the window. "I'm staying here!" Martin's face went purple. "Girl, you get out here right now. You're coming home." "I don't have a home," Clara called back. "You made sure of that." "I'm your father." "You sold me!" The words ripped out of her, raw and jagged. "You tied my hands and you sold me in front of the whole town. You got no right to call yourself my father." One of the ranch hands muttered something. Dutch silenced him with a look. "Vorn," Dutch said. "We're not leaving without her." "Yeah," Elias said. "You are." "You can't take 6 of us." "Maybe not." Elias's voice was flat, cold. "But I'll take 4 before you get me. Maybe 5. You want to be one of the lucky ones who makes it home? You want to bet your life I'll miss?" The men shifted uneasily. They'd come expecting an easy fight, one crazy mountain man against 6 armed men. But Elias Vorn stood there like death itself, and suddenly no one looked quite so confident. "You're making a mistake," Martin said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "The mistake was coming up here." Elias raised his rifle slightly. "Now you got 2 choices. Turn around and go home, or find out what happens when you don't." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dutch Carver's hand dropped to his sidearm. Elias shot him. The sound cracked across the clearing like thunder. Dutch went down hard, clutching his shoulder, screaming. The other men scattered, diving for cover behind trees. "Next one's between the eyes," Elias roared. More shots. Wood splintered on the cabin wall. Elias moved like water, dropping behind the woodpile, returning fire with mechanical precision. Clara grabbed her rifle and took position at the window. She could see men moving through the trees. One broke cover, trying to circle around. She fired. Missed. Fired again. The man dove back into cover. The fight lasted maybe 5 minutes. It felt like hours. When it was over, Dutch Carver was on the ground bleeding. 2 other men were down, one clutching his leg, the other not moving. The rest were gone, crashing through the brush in full retreat. Martin Whitlock was gone too. Elias stood in the clearing, rifle still raised, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm from a graze across his bicep. "Clara," he shouted. "You hurt?" "No! Stay inside." He approached Dutch carefully, kicked the man's gun away. Dutch looked up at him with hate-filled eyes. "You're dead, Vorn," he gasped. "Sheriff will come for you now." "Let him come." Elias crouched down. "You tell him what happened here. You tell him you came onto my land with armed men. You tell him you tried to take a woman against her will. You think he's going to give a damn about you?" Dutch spat blood. "That girl's a whore." Elias hit him. One clean punch that laid Dutch flat. "She's braver than you'll ever be," Elias said quietly. "Now get up, get your men, and get off my mountain." He hauled Dutch to his feet and shoved him toward the tree line. Dutch stumbled, clutching his bleeding shoulder, and disappeared into the woods. The man with the leg wound crawled after him, leaving a smear of blood. The third man didn't move. Elias checked him, felt for a pulse. His shoulders sagged slightly. "Is he—" Clara's voice came from the doorway. "Yeah." She came out onto the porch, rifle still in hand. Looked at the dead man. He was young. Couldn't have been more than 20. She didn't recognize him. "Did I—" "No, that was mine." Clara felt something twist in her chest. Not quite relief. Not quite guilt. Something uglier. "They'll come back," she said. "Maybe." Elias looked at her. "You can still leave. I'll take you to another town, somewhere your father's name doesn't reach. Somewhere you can start over." Clara thought about it. She really did. Thought about a clean start. About a place where no one knew what she'd been or what had happened. But she looked at the cabin. At the clearing. At the mountains rising up around them like walls against the world. "No," she said. "I'm staying." Elias nodded slowly. "All right then." They buried the dead man that afternoon, up on the hillside under a pine tree. Didn't mark the grave. Didn't say any words. Just put him in the ground and covered him up. That night, Clara lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside. Listening to Elias move through the cabin, barring the door again, checking the windows, keeping watch. She pressed her hands to her belly and felt the baby kick. "This is our home," she whispered. "No one's taking it from us." And for the first time, she meant it. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Elias sat by the fire that night, Clara working on his arm with shaking hands. The bullet had carved a groove through the meat of his bicep, deep enough that she could see things she didn't want to see. She'd already used half their clean cloth trying to staunch it. "Press harder," Elias said through gritted teeth. "I am pressing hard." "Then press harder than that." Clara bore down with both hands. Blood welled up between her fingers, hot and slick. The baby kicked frantically inside her, responding to her racing heart. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "You need a doctor." "Closest doctor's in Red Hollow." "Then we'll go." "We're not going anywhere." Elias looked at her with eyes that had gone hard again. "You think your father's going to let us walk into town after today? We'd be strung up before nightfall. Then what do we do? You sew it shut. Clara's stomach lurched. I can't. You can. You've mended clothes. This ain't different. It's completely different. Clara. His voice cut through her panic like a blade. I need you to do this. I can't do it myself, and if it doesn't get closed, I'll bleed out by morning. You understand? She understood. She also understood that her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the cloth, let alone thread a needle through human skin. I've got whiskey, Elias said. For the pain. And for cleaning. You do this right, I'll probably live. You do it wrong. He shrugged with his good shoulder. Well, at least you'll have the cabin. Don't talk like that. I'm being practical. Clara wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him she couldn't do this, that she wasn't strong enough, that she was just a girl from a frontier town who'd gotten herself pregnant and ruined, and there was nothing special about her at all. But she looked at his face and saw that he believed she could, saw that he trusted her with his life in a way no one ever had. So she heated the needle in the fire until it glowed. She poured whiskey over the wound and over her hands while Elias hissed and cursed. She threaded the needle with gut line from his fishing kit because that's what he told her to use. And then, with Elias biting down on a leather strap, she pushed the needle through his skin. He made a sound like an animal. His whole body went rigid. Clara felt bile rise in her throat but forced it down and pulled the thread through. Made another stitch. Another. Keep going, Elias gasped when she paused. Don't stop. She didn't stop. She stitched the wound closed with 12 clumsy, uneven stitches that would have made any real doctor cringe. But they held. When she tied off the thread and sat back, her hands were covered in his blood, and she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. You did good, Elias said. His face was gray, slick with sweat. Real good. Clara ran outside and vomited in the bushes. When she came back in, Elias had wrapped the wound himself and was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. He offered it to her. She took it and drank, choking on the burn. First time's always the worst, he said. First time for what? Keeping someone alive when they're trying to die. Clara looked at him, at the blood on the floor, at the bandage already seeping red. You're not gonna die. Probably not. But you didn't know that when you started. She hadn't. She'd been sure the whole time that she was going to kill him, that her shaking hands would slip and she'd sever something vital and watch him bleed out on the cabin floor, but she'd done it anyway. Thank you, Elias said quietly. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She cleaned up the blood as best she could while Elias finished the whiskey. By the time she was done, he'd fallen asleep sitting up, his head tipped back against the chair. She stood there for a long moment, just looking at him. This man who'd bought her, who'd given her a locked door and taught her to shoot, who'd killed for her today without hesitation. She didn't know what that made them to each other, didn't know if there was even a word for it. But when she finally went to bed that night, she left her door open again. The fever started 2 days later. Clara woke to the sound of Elias thrashing in his bedroll by the fire. She rushed out to find him soaked with sweat, his skin burning hot to the touch. The wound on his arm was angry red, swollen tight. No, 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 Clara whispered. She'd seen infection before, seen it take her mother in less than a week. She spent the day trying everything she knew, cold compresses to bring down the fever, poultices made from plants Elias had shown her. She changed the bandage and cleaned the wound with whiskey, making him scream even in his delirium. Nothing worked. By nightfall, Elias was muttering in his sleep. Names Clara didn't recognize. Apologies for things she couldn't understand. He called out for Sarah, voice breaking, begging her not to leave. Clara sat beside him and pressed a wet cloth to his forehead. You don't get to die, she told him. You hear me? You brought me up here. You made me believe I could survive. You don't get to leave me alone now. He didn't respond. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Clara was 8 months pregnant, alone on a mountain with a man dying of infection. She had no way to get help, no one to turn to. If Elias died, she'd be by herself when the baby came. She'd have to figure out how to survive the winter, how to hunt, how to do all the things he'd been teaching her, but she hadn't fully learned yet. Terror closed around her throat like a fist. But then she remembered something. A conversation weeks ago when Elias was showing her the root cellar. He'd pointed to a jar of dried herbs and said, "That's yarrow. Old Eliza Crow taught me about it. Said it could fight infection if you made it strong enough." Clara ran to the root cellar, found the jar. The dried leaves crumbled between her fingers, releasing a bitter smell. She boiled water and steeped the herbs, making the brew as strong as she dared. Getting it into Elias was harder. He fought her, lost in fever dreams. But Clara was stubborn and desperate. She pried his mouth open and poured the tea down his throat, making him swallow. "You drink this," she said. "You drink it and you live. That's an order." She gave him more every few hours through the night. By dawn, she was exhausted and terrified and running on nothing but fear and stubbornness. But when the sun came up, Elias's fever had broken. He opened his eyes, looking confused and weak. "Clara?" She burst into tears. "Hey, hey!" His voice was rough as gravel. "I'm okay." "You almost died." "But I didn't. Because I made you drink yarrow tea all night. Then I guess we're even." He tried to sit up and winced. "You stitched me. I scared you half to death. You brought me back. We're square." Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We're not square. You're still an idiot for getting shot." "Fair enough." She helped him drink water, made him eat broth even though he said he wasn't hungry, changed his bandage and was relieved to see that the swelling had gone down. "The baby okay?" Elias asked. Clara put a hand to her belly. "Yeah, just keeps kicking." "Good. That's good." He fell back asleep. Clara sat beside him and watched him breathe, watched the rise and fall of his chest, watched color slowly return to his face. She'd saved his life. The realization hit her like a physical thing. This man who everyone feared, who'd survived things that would break most people, she'd kept him alive. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. Over the next week, Elias healed slowly. He couldn't do much at first, so Clara took over more of the work. She fed the chickens, hauled water, kept the fire going. She even tried to hunt, though she came back empty-handed more often than not. "You're walking too heavy," Elias said one afternoon. He was sitting on the porch, still weak but insisting on being useful. "Animals hear you coming from a mile away. I'm 8 months pregnant. I can't exactly sneak." "Then you need to hunt smarter. Set snares, trap lines. Let the animals come to you." He taught her from the porch, too weak to go out, but determined to make sure she could survive if something happened to him. Clara learned fast because she had to. Every day brought them closer to winter, closer to the time when she'd be useless for hunting, when the baby would come and everything would change. "You scared?" Elias asked one evening. They were sitting by the fire, Clara mending one of his shirts while he carved a piece of wood into something she couldn't identify yet. "Of what?" "The baby coming." Clara's hand stilled on the shirt. Terrified. "Yeah, that's normal." "Your wife, Sarah, did she ever—" "No, she wanted kids. We tried. It just never happened." His knife moved steadily across the wood, shaving off thin curls. "Maybe that was for the best. She didn't want to bring a child into this world, said it was too hard, too mean." "But you wanted them." "I wanted whatever made her happy." He paused. "But yeah, I wanted them." Clara watched his hands work, watched the shape emerging from the wood, something round, smooth. "What are you making?" "Rattle. For the baby." Something warm and unexpected bloomed in Clara's chest. "You don't have to do that." "I know." "Then why?" Elias looked at her. His eyes were softer than she'd ever seen them. "Because every kid should have something that's theirs, something made special for them." Clara's throat tightened. She went back to mending the shirt so he wouldn't see her face. They worked in comfortable silence until Clara spoke again. "You think they'll come back? My father and the others?" "Eventually. Men like that don't like being beaten by a woman and a crippled mountain man." "You're not crippled." "I'm slow right now. Same thing." "What do we do when they come?" Elias set down the carving. "We do what we did last time. We fight, and we make it hurt enough that they think twice about trying again. And if it doesn't work, then we leave. Head further up the mountain where they can't follow. Start over." Clara put a hand to her belly. "I can't travel. Not now." "I know. That's why we need to make sure they don't come back until after the baby's born." "How do we do that?" We don't give them a reason to. The next morning, Elias was up before dawn despite Clara's protests. He was still pale, still weak, but he moved with purpose. He saddled the mare and checked his rifle. "Where are you going?" Clara demanded. "Town." "Are you insane? They'll kill you." "No, they won't, because I'm going under a white flag. I'm going to talk to the sheriff. Make it official that you're staying here by choice. Get it on record. Elias, if something happens to me, you take the mare and you ride north. There's a settlement about 2 days from here. Ask for a woman named Eliza Crow. Tell her Elias Vorn sent you. She'll help." "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Probably not, but if it does, you know what to do." He rode out before she could argue further. Clara stood on the porch and watched him disappear into the trees, one hand pressed to her belly, fear cold and sharp in her chest. He was gone all day. Clara tried to work but couldn't focus. She kept seeing Elias shot, hanged, beaten. She kept imagining horses coming up the trail without him. When the sun started to set, she grabbed the rifle and positioned herself by the window. Full dark came. Still no Elias. Clara's hands shook as she loaded the rifle. She'd give him until midnight. If he wasn't back by then, hoofbeats. She raised the rifle, finger on the trigger, waited. "Clara, it's me. Don't shoot." She sagged with relief, set the rifle down and threw open the door. Elias was there, still on the mare, looking exhausted but alive. "You're okay," she breathed. "Yeah, told you I would be." She helped him down from the horse. He winced when his feet hit the ground, and she could see fresh blood seeping through his shirt. "You tore your stitches." "Probably." "You idiot." "Yeah, well," he managed a tired smile. "At least I'm a useful idiot." Inside, Clara made him sit while she examined the wound. 3 of her stitches had pulled loose. She had to redo them while Elias drank whiskey and cursed steadily. "What happened in town?" she asked as she worked. "Talked to Sheriff Hayes, told him exactly what went down up here. He didn't like it, but he couldn't argue with the facts. Your father and his men came onto my land armed. They tried to take you by force. I defended my property." "I'm not property." "That's what I told him. But legally, up here, you kind of are. I paid for you. You're under my protection. That makes you my responsibility." The words should have stung, should have made her angry. But Clara understood what he was really saying, that he'd used the law's own cruelty to protect her, that he'd turned her father's weapon against him. What did the sheriff say? He said if you want to leave, you can come to him any time. He'll make arrangements. But if you're staying by choice, then your father has no legal claim. And if anyone tries to take you again, I'm within my rights to defend you. By killing them. If necessary. Clara tied off the last stitch. "Did you see him? My father?" "Yeah, he was in the saloon, looked at me like I was something he scraped off his boot." Elias's jaw tightened. "I told him if he ever came near you again, I'd bury him next to the man he got killed on my mountain." "What did he say?" "Nothing. Just sat there drinking. But Dutch Carver was there too, his shoulder all bandaged up. He said I'd pay for what I did." "Great. So they're definitely coming back." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll decide you're not worth dying over." Elias looked at her. "Either way, we'll be ready." Clara cleaned up the blood and bandaged him again. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. The baby was pressing so hard on her lungs she could barely breathe. "I need to lie down," she said. "You okay?" "Just tired." Elias nodded. "Go rest. I'll keep watch." Clara went to her room but couldn't sleep. She lay there listening to Elias move around outside, checking the door, the windows, keeping watch like he had every night since she'd arrived. She thought about her father sitting in the saloon, about Dutch Carver with his bandaged shoulder and his promises of revenge, about Thomas, wherever he was, probably not thinking about her at all. And she thought about Elias, about the way he'd ridden into town wounded just to protect her, about the rattle he was carving, about how he'd kept every promise he'd made. The baby kicked hard. Clara pressed her hand to the spot and felt the shape of a tiny foot or elbow. "Your daddy's out there somewhere," she whispered. "But he's not here. And the man who is here, he's not your daddy, but he's the one protecting us. I don't know what that makes us, but I know we're safe with him." The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Clara closed her eyes and let herself drift, listening to the sound of Elias moving through the cabin. The sound of someone keeping watch. The sound of home. 3 weeks passed. Clara grew bigger, slower, more uncomfortable. Her belly was enormous now, tight as a drum. Every movement was an effort. Getting up, sitting down. Even breathing felt like work. "How much longer?" she asked Elias one morning. She was trying to wash dishes, but her belly kept getting in the way. Hard to say. Could be days. Could be weeks. Helpful. First babies take their time. How do you know that? My mother had 6 kids. I remember the last 2. She said the first one made her wait till she thought she'd lose her mind. Clara dried a plate and set it on the shelf. What happened to them? Your family? Elias was quiet for a moment. Fire took most of them. The ones who didn't die then scattered. I don't know where they are now. Don't much care to find out. Why not? Because some things are better left buried. Clara didn't push. She'd learned that about Elias's past. There were doors he'd open and doors that stayed locked. She respected that. She had locked doors of her own. That afternoon, Clara felt the first real contraction. It started as a tightening across her belly, then built into something that made her gasp and grab the table. Clara? Elias was at her side instantly. What's wrong? I don't know. It hurts. Where? Everywhere. The pain peaked, then faded. Clara breathed hard, sweat breaking out on her forehead. How bad? Elias asked. Bad. But it stopped. That's normal. It's your body getting ready. Ready for what? For the baby to come. Clara looked at him with wide eyes. Now? Could be now, could be later, but soon. Terror flooded through her. Elias, I don't know how to do this. I know. Do you? Do I know how to deliver a baby? He looked uncomfortable. I've pulled calves and foals. Can't be that different. I'm not a cow. I know that. Another contraction hit. This one was stronger. Clara doubled over, gripping the table so hard her knuckles went white. Elias supported her weight, one hand on her back. Breathe through it, he said. Don't fight it. Easy for you to say. The contraction faded. Clara straightened slowly, breathing hard. I need to get things ready, Elias said. Clean sheets, hot water, sharp knife, whiskey. Why do you need a knife? For cutting the cord. Clara's stomach turned. Right, the cord. Over the next few hours, the contractions came and went, sometimes close together, sometimes far apart. Clara walked circles around the cabin because moving seemed to help. Elias prepared everything with methodical efficiency, boiling water, laying out clean cloth, checking and rechecking his supplies. You've done this before, Clara said between contractions. Helped Sarah's sister once. The midwife didn't make it in time. Did everything go okay? Baby and mother both lived. That's all that matters. As night fell, the contractions got worse, closer together, stronger. Clara couldn't walk anymore. She lay on her bed, gripping the sheets, trying to breathe through the pain. Elias sat beside her. You're doing good. I'm not doing anything. You're surviving. That counts. The pain built and built until Clara thought she'd break from it. She screamed into a pillow, cursed Elias, cursed her father, cursed Thomas most of all for putting her in this position and then running away like a coward. I can't do this, she gasped. You are doing this. I can't. Clara. Elias took her hand. His grip was solid, steady. You shot at armed men. You stitched me up when I was bleeding out. You kept me alive through infection. You can do this. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was so big, so overwhelming, that it felt like it would consume her entirely. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but you're not alone. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Clara gripped his hand and held on like it was the only real thing in the world. And then, in a rush of pain and blood and terror that seemed to last forever and no time at all, the baby came. The baby didn't cry at first. Elias worked fast, his hands steady despite the blood. He cleared the infant's mouth and nose, rubbed her chest, and for 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, there was nothing but terrible silence. Then a wail split the air, small and angry and alive. Clara started crying. She couldn't help it. Relief and exhaustion and something too big to name crashed over her all at once. "It's a girl," Elias said. His voice was rough. "You got a daughter." He wrapped the baby in clean cloth and placed her on Clara's chest. She was so small, so impossibly small. Her face was red and scrunched up, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving in outrage at being pulled into the cold world. "She's perfect," Clara whispered. "She's got all her fingers and toes, that's what matters." But Elias's hand shook slightly as he checked the baby over. "Breathing good, strong lungs, that's real good." There was still work to do, the cord to cut, the afterbirth, more bleeding than Clara thought possible. But Elias handled it all with calm efficiency, talking her through each step, making sure she understood what was happening. "You did it," he said finally. He was washing his hands in a basin, the water turning pink. "You did real good." "I screamed at you." "Yeah, you did. Called me some names I'd never heard before." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've heard worse." He dried his hands and came to sit beside the bed, looked down at the baby sleeping on Clara's chest. "She's got your nose." Clara touched the tiny face with one finger. "She's got Thomas's eyes." "You don't know that yet. All babies have dark eyes at first." "I know." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. The baby made small snuffling sounds, her mouth working even in sleep. "What are you going to call her?" Elias asked. Clara had thought about names for months, had considered family names, pretty names, names from books she'd read. But looking at her daughter now, only one felt right. "Hope," she said. "Her name's Hope." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "That's good. That's real good." "You think it's stupid?" "No, I think it's exactly right." He stood up slowly. "You need to rest. I'll clean up and keep watch." "Elias," he turned back. "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything. You did all the hard work. You kept us alive." He looked at her for a long moment. Something passed across his face, something soft and vulnerable that was gone before she could name it. "Get some sleep," he said quietly. "I'll wake you when she needs feeding." Clara wanted to stay awake, wanted to watch Hope breathe and make sure she kept doing it. But exhaustion pulled her down like stones tied to her ankles, and she was asleep before Elias left the room. She woke to Hope crying. The sound was different from before, hungry now instead of outraged. Clara's breasts ached and felt heavy. Her whole body hurt in ways she'd never imagined. "Hey," Elias said softly from the doorway. "She's been fussing for a few minutes." Clara struggled to sit up. Everything pulled wrong. "How long was I asleep?" "Maybe 2 hours." It felt like 2 minutes. Clara reached for the baby, and Elias brought her over carefully. Hope latched on immediately, greedy and determined. "She knows what she wants," Elias observed. "Gets that from me." He almost smiled. "Yeah, I figured." Over the next few days, Clara learned what exhaustion really meant. Hope needed to eat constantly, every 2 hours, sometimes more. Clara would fall asleep sitting up, the baby in her arms, and wake to Elias gently taking Hope and laying her in the wooden cradle he'd built while Clara was still pregnant. "You need to sleep more than this," he said. "She needs to eat. And you need to heal. You're no good to her if you collapse." But Clara couldn't stop. Couldn't turn off the fear that if she closed her eyes for too long, something would happen. Hope would stop breathing. The cabin would catch fire. Men would come through the door. On the third day, Elias made her eat a full meal and drink tea he'd made from herbs. "What's in this?" Clara asked suspiciously. "Things to help you sleep. Don't argue." "I need to stay awake. I'll watch her. You sleep for 4 hours. That's an order." Clara wanted to fight, but she was too tired. The tea made her head feel fuzzy and warm. She lay down with Hope beside her in the cradle and was asleep in seconds. When she woke, the cabin was dark except for firelight. She panicked for a moment, reaching for the cradle, but Hope was there, sleeping peacefully. And in the chair beside the bed sat Elias, whittling something by the firelight. "You were supposed to wake me," Clara said. "You were supposed to sleep. You did. Everyone wins." "How long?" 6 hours. Clara sat up carefully. Her body still hurt, but the fog in her head had lifted. Did she wake up? Twice. I walked her. She went back to sleep both times. She didn't need to eat? Not till now, I'd guess. As if on cue, Hope began to stir. Clara picked her up and began feeding her, and Elias went back to his whittling. What are you making? Clara asked. He held up a small wooden horse, crude but recognizable. Thought she should have toys. Can't just sleep all the time. She's 3 days old. So? Never too early to start. Clara watched him work, watched the way his hands moved, rough hands that had killed men and delivered a baby and carved toys in the firelight, hands that had never once hurt her. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Doing what? All of it. Taking care of us. You didn't have to buy me. You didn't have to bring me here. You could have taken your $500 and walked away. Elias set down the carving, looked at her directly. You want the truth? Always. I saw you on that platform, and I saw Sarah. Not her exactly, but he struggled for words. I saw someone who deserved better than what the world was giving them. Someone who'd been failed by everyone who was supposed to protect them. And I couldn't. His jaw worked. I couldn't let it happen again. Again? I failed Sarah. She got sick, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't do anything but watch her die. His voice was raw. I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. Then I saw you, and I knew if I walked away, you'd die. Maybe not right away, but eventually. They'd kill you slow. And I couldn't live with that. Clara's throat tightened. So you saved me to save yourself? Maybe. Or maybe I saved you because it was the right thing to do, and I'm tired of the world being so goddamn wrong all the time. He picked up the carving again. Doesn't matter now. You're here. She's here. And I'm going to make sure you both stay safe. Even if more men come? Especially then. Hope finished eating and fell back asleep. Clara held her close, breathing in that new baby smell. I don't know how to be a mother. No one does till they do it. What if I'm bad at it? Then you'll learn. Same way you learn to shoot, same way you learn to stitch wounds. Elias looked at the baby. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She just needs you to try. Clara hoped he was right. The next week was a blur of feeding and sleeping and learning. Clara's body slowly healed, though not without complaint. Everything hurt. Her breasts ached, her back felt like it might never straighten, and there was bleeding, so much bleeding that she thought something must be wrong until Elias assured her it was normal. How do you know all this? She asked. Helped with animals enough? Bodies work the same way, mostly. I'm not a cow. I know, cows complain less. She threw a rag at him, bishpesen. He caught it and grinned, and Clara realized it was the first time she'd seen him actually smile. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, less haunted. Hope grew. Not much. She was still impossibly tiny, but Clara could see the changes. The way she focused on faces now. The way her fists weren't quite so clenched. The way she'd quiet when Clara sang to her, even though Clara's voice wasn't anything special. You got a good voice, Elias said one night. Clara was singing an old lullaby her mother used to sing, walking Hope around the cabin. You're a liar. I don't lie, remember? That was the rule. Then you're going deaf. Maybe, but Hope likes it. That's what counts. Clara looked down at her daughter, who was indeed quieting in her arms. My mother used to sing this to me, before she died. How old were you? 10. The fever took her in 2 days. Clara's voice caught. I used to think if I'd been older, smarter, I could have saved her, could have done something. You were a kid. Doesn't matter. I should have tried. Clara. Elias came to stand beside her. You can't save everyone. Sometimes people die and there's nothing you can do but survive them. Like Sarah. Like Sarah. They stood there in the firelight, Clara holding Hope, Elias close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. It should have felt wrong, standing so close to a man who wasn't the baby's father. But it didn't. It felt right in a way Clara couldn't explain. I should put her down, Claire said. Yeah, but neither of them moved. 2 weeks after Hope was born, the weather turned. Snow came down in thick sheets, piling up fast. Elias had been preparing for it, stockpiling wood, reinforcing the barn, making sure the chickens had enough feed. But the storm was worse than expected. By the second day, they couldn't see 10 feet beyond the cabin. The wind howled like something alive and angry. Snow drifted up against the door. "We're stuck," Elias said. He was looking out the window at the white wall outside. "Could be days before this clears." "We got enough supplies?" "Yeah, food, water, wood. We're fine for a month if we need to be." But Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me. Rule, remember?" He sighed. "If anyone comes now, we won't see them till they're on top of us. Storm covers all sound. We could have a whole army out there and wouldn't know till they kicked the door in." Fear spiked through Clara. "You think they'd come in this weather?" "No, but I thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong." That night, Elias didn't sleep. Clara would wake to feed Hope and find him sitting by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the snow fall. She wanted to tell him to rest, but she understood. He was doing what he'd always done, keeping watch, keeping them safe. On the third day of the storm, Hope developed a cough. It started small, just a little congestion, but by evening she was wheezing, her tiny chest working too hard to breathe. "Something's wrong," Clara said. Fear made her voice sharp. Elias examined the baby carefully, listened to her breathing, felt her forehead. "She's not feverish. Could just be the cold air. Or it could be something worse. Let's not panic yet." But Clara was already panicking. She'd heard stories of babies dying from simple colds, of infections that spread fast and killed faster, and they were snowed in with no way to get help. She held Hope close, listening to every breath, feeling the rattle in that tiny chest. "What do we do?" "Keep her warm. Steam from hot water might help. And there's mullein leaf, good for the lungs." Elias was already moving, pulling jars from shelves. "We'll make a tea, have you drink it. It'll pass through your milk to her." They worked together through the night. Clara drank bitter tea and fed Hope as much as she'd take. Elias kept water boiling, so steam filled the cabin. They took turns holding the baby near the warm vapor, watching her breathe. By morning, Hope's breathing had eased. Not much, but enough that Clara could finally exhale. "She's going to be okay," Elias said. "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do. She's a fighter. Gets it from her mother." Clara looked at him with exhausted eyes. "What if you're wrong?" "Then we deal with it. But I'm not wrong." He was right. By that evening, Hope's cough was mostly gone. By the next day, she was back to her normal self, eating, sleeping, making the small sounds that meant she was content. The storm finally broke on the 7th day. Clara stepped outside into a world transformed. Snow everywhere, pristine and blinding in the sunlight. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. "Beautiful, ain't it?" Elias was shoveling a path from the cabin to the barn. "It's freezing." "That too." Clara watched him work. He'd been taking care of them for weeks now, cooking, cleaning, watching over Hope while Clara slept, doing everything that needed doing without complaint. "You should rest," she said. "I'm fine." "You're always fine, even when you're not." He stopped shoveling and leaned on the handle. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to admit that you're tired, that this is hard, that you need help." "I don't need help. I need to keep you safe." "Why?" Clara stepped closer. "Why does it have to be all on you?" "Because it is." "That's not an answer." Elias looked at her for a long moment. Snow melted in his dark hair. His breath came out in white clouds. "Because if something happens to you or Hope, I'll have failed again. And I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't survive failing again." Clara's heart cracked. She closed the distance between them and put her hand on his arm. "You haven't failed anyone. You saved us. Both of us. For now. For now is enough." They stood there in the snow, and something shifted between them. Something that had been building since the auction block, since the first night in the cabin, since every moment of survival and fear and trust. "I need to check the traps," Elias said finally. "You should go inside. Too cold out here for you." Clara went back inside, put Hope in her cradle, sat down and tried to understand what she was feeling. She wasn't supposed to care about Elias Vorn. He was the man who'd bought her, the transaction, the means to survival. But somewhere along the way, he'd become more than that. He'd become the person who kept watch while she slept, who taught her to fight, who delivered her baby and carved toys by firelight and drank bitter tea at 3 a.m. when Hope was sick. He'd become home. That thought should have terrified her. Instead, it settled into her chest like a warm coal, steady and certain. That night, after Hope was fed and sleeping, Clara went to Elias. He was sitting by this fire, cleaning his rifle for the 100th time. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah." "Why'd you really buy me? The real reason?" He set down the rifle, looked at her with those dark, haunted eyes. "You want the truth?" "Always. I bought you because I was tired of being alone. Tired of waking up every morning in this cabin with nothing but ghosts for company. I told myself I was saving you, but maybe you were saving me." He paused. "Does that make me selfish?" "No, it makes you human." "Don't know if that's better." Clara sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I hated you at first, thought you were going to use me up and throw me away like everyone else." "I know." "But you didn't. You gave me choices, gave me space, gave me a locked door and the key to open it." She looked at him. "No man ever gave me choices before." "Every woman deserves choices." "Yeah, but most men don't believe that." They sat in silence, watching the fire burn. Hope made a small sound in her sleep, and they both turned to look. She was fine, just dreaming, one tiny fist pressed to her mouth. "She looks like you when she sleeps," Elias said. "You think?" "Yeah, got that same stubborn set to her mouth." Clara smiled. "She's gonna need stubborn, growing up out here." "She's got you for a mother. She'll be fine." "And you," Clara said quietly. "She's got you too." Elias looked at her, surprised. "I'm not her father." "No, but you're here, and you care. That counts for something." "Thomas might come back." "Thomas is a coward who ran. He doesn't get to come back now and pretend he cares. He's still her blood." "Blood doesn't mean much when it abandons you." Clara's voice was hard. "Trust me on that." Elias nodded slowly. "What are we doing here, Clara?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, it feels right." "Yeah, it does." They sat there until the fire burned low and Hope woke for her feeding. And when Clara stood to get the baby, Elias's hand brushed hers. Brief, careful, asking permission. She didn't pull away. Over the next few weeks, winter settled in hard. Some days it was too cold to go outside. They stayed in the cabin, the 3 of them, learning to live in close quarters. Elias taught Clara to carve wood. She taught him songs she remembered from childhood. They took turns walking Hope when she was fussy, and sometimes Clara would wake in the night to find Elias standing by the cradle, just watching the baby breathe. "You don't have to do that," she said one night. "I know, but I like to. Make sure she's real." "She's real." "Yeah, but sometimes I can't believe she is. Can't believe any of this is." Clara understood. She felt the same way, like they'd built something fragile and impossible, and any moment the world would remember they existed and come to tear it down. But the world stayed away. The snow piled higher, the days grew shorter, and inside the cabin, something like a family took shape. It wasn't perfect. Elias still had nightmares that made him wake gasping. Clara still had days where the fear was so big she could barely breathe. Hope cried for hours sometimes, and nothing they did would soothe her. But they figured it out together, and every day they survived felt like a small victory against a world that had tried to break them both. One night, Clara found Elias at the window again, watching the darkness. "You waiting for them?" she asked. "Always." "They might not come." "They'll come. Men like that always do." "Then we'll fight, like before." "You got a baby now. You should run if they come." "I'm not running anymore." Clara stood beside him. "This is my home. Our home. And I'll fight for it." Elias looked at her, and something fierce and proud burned in his eyes. "Yeah, you will." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face, rough and warm. "I'm going to keep you safe," he said. "Both of you. I swear it." I know. And she did. Clara trusted Elias Vorn in a way she'd never trusted anyone. Trusted him with her life, with Hope's life, with the fragile, impossible thing they were building together. She leaned into his touch, and he pulled her close. They stood there in the darkness, two broken people holding each other up, while their daughter slept peacefully in her cradle. Outside, the wind howled. The snow kept falling, and somewhere down the mountain, in a town that had tried to erase her, men were probably plotting their return. But Clara wasn't afraid anymore. Let them come, she'd be ready. They came in early spring when the snow was melting and the ground was soft with mud. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horses. Her hands froze on the wet sheet, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Hope was inside, sleeping in her cradle. Elias was checking the trap line, wouldn't be back for another hour. She dropped the laundry and ran. Inside, she grabbed the rifle and positioned herself by the window. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Through the gap in the shutters, she counted. 5 horses, 6 men. Her father was in front again. Dutch Carver beside him, his shoulder healed but the anger in his face as fresh as ever. And behind them, Clara's blood went cold. Thomas Garrett. The man who'd promised her everything and given her nothing but shame. "Clara Whitlock!" Her father's voice boomed across the clearing. "I know you're in there. Come out. We need to talk." She didn't answer, just kept the rifle steady, finger on the trigger. "I brought someone who wants to see you," Martin continued. "Thomas here says he's made a mistake. Says he wants to make things right, be a father to his child." Clara's laugh came out bitter and sharp. "Now he wants to be a father? Where was he 8 months ago?" "I was scared," Thomas called out. He sounded pathetic. "I was young and stupid and I ran. But I'm here now. I want to do right by you." "You want to do right by your reputation, you mean?" Clara shouted back. "You don't give a damn about me or Hope." "Hope?" Her father's voice dripped with disdain. "You named the bastard Hope? Don't you dare call her that." "I'll call her what she is. Now stop this foolishness and come out. Thomas is willing to marry you. Give the child a name. That's more than you deserve." Clara's hands shook with rage. "I don't want to marry him. I don't want anything from any of you." "You don't have a choice," Dutch Carver said. "You're coming back whether you like it or not. We've been patient, but that ends today." "Vorn ain't here to protect you," another voice added, one of the ranch hands. "And we know you can't fight all of us." Clara's mind raced. They were right. She could maybe take down 2 of them before they got to the cabin. But 6? And with Hope inside, she needed time. Needed to stall until Elias got back. "Let me think about it," she called out. "Think fast," her father said. "We're not waiting all day." Clara looked at Hope, still sleeping peacefully in her cradle. 3 months old now, getting bigger every day. She had Thomas's dark hair but Clara's stubborn chin, and she deserved better than to be dragged back to Red Hollow as proof that her mother had been tamed. "If I come with you," Clara said slowly, "you leave this place alone. You don't burn it. You don't hurt anyone who lives here." "You got my word," Martin said. "Your word's worth nothing." "Then you ain't got much choice, do you?" Clara's jaw clenched. She was considering something desperate, maybe running out the back, taking Hope and fleeing into the woods, when she heard it. A single gunshot, distant but distinct. Everyone froze. "That came from the north," one of the men said. "Could be Vorn," Dutch muttered. "Could be a warning shot," Martin said. "Probably circling around trying to get behind us." But Clara knew different. That shot had come from too far away. Elias wouldn't have fired unless... Her blood ran cold. Unless someone else was out there. Unless this wasn't just 6 men. Unless they'd brought more and positioned them around the mountain. "You brought an army," she said flatly. Her father smiled. "Brought enough. Now come out, or we start burning buildings." Clara's mind spun. If they had men surrounding the area, Elias was walking into a trap. He'd be outnumbered, outgunned, and if she stayed here, they'd burn the cabin with Hope inside. She looked at her daughter, at the tiny face that trusted her completely. Then she made her choice. "All right," she called out. "I'm coming, but I need to get the baby ready. Give me 5 minutes." "You got 2." Clara moved fast. She wrapped Hope in her warmest blanket, grabbed the leather bag Elias kept stocked with emergency supplies. Then she did something she'd been avoiding for months. She wrote a note. Elias, gone to draw them away from Hope. Taking her north to Eliza Crow, like you said, don't follow. They want me to make an example. Let them have it. Keep yourself alive. That's all that matters. See. She left it on the table where he'd see it. Then she bundled Hope against her chest, checked the rifle one more time, and opened the door. The men were waiting. Clara walked out slowly, Hope hidden in the folds of her coat. Smart choice, her father said. But his eyes were cold, calculating. This wasn't about family. It was about control. I got conditions, Clara said. You ain't in a position to make conditions. I am if you want me to come quiet. Otherwise I start shooting, and maybe I take one or two of you with me before you get me. You want to risk being one of them? The men shifted nervously. They remembered what happened last time. What do you want? Her father asked through gritted teeth. I ride alone. No one touches me. No one touches the baby. And when we get to town, you give me 1 day to settle my affairs before... She almost choked on the words. Before I marry Thomas. Thomas actually smiled, like he'd won something. Done, Martin said. Now, let's go. I need a horse. You can ride with Thomas. No, I ride alone or I don't ride at all. Her father cursed, but he nodded to one of the men, who brought up a spare horse. Clara mounted awkwardly with Hope strapped to her chest. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. They started down the mountain. Clara kept looking back at the cabin, hoping to see Elias emerge from the trees. But there was nothing. Just silence and smoke from the chimney. Please be alive, she thought. Please be smart enough to let me go. They'd been riding for maybe 20 minutes when Clara heard the first scream. It came from the rear of the group. One of the men just disappeared. Yanked off his horse by something in the trees, his screams cut off abruptly. What the hell? Dutch started to say. Another man went down. This time Clara saw the rope snap tight around his neck, saw him hauled into the brush. It's Vorn, someone shouted. Stay together, Martin yelled. He's just one man. But Elias Vorn didn't fight like one man. He fought like a ghost, like the mountain itself had come alive and decided they didn't belong. Gunshots echoed through the trees, men scattered, trying to find cover. Clara pulled her horse to the side, shielding Hope with her body. Through the chaos, she saw him. Elias, moving through the trees like smoke. He'd drop a man, disappear, reappear somewhere else. He was bleeding. She could see the dark stain on his side, but he didn't slow down. Get the girl, Dutch screamed. He's here for the girl. 2 men grabbed for Clara's reins. She kicked one in the face, sent him sprawling. The second one got hold of the horse, but then there was a gunshot, and he dropped, clutching his leg. Clara, run! Elias's voice cut through the chaos. She didn't need to be told twice. She dug her heels into the horse and took off into the trees, branches whipping at her face. Behind her, she could hear gunfire, screaming, the sounds of men fighting. She rode hard for maybe 10 minutes before the horse stumbled on loose rock. Clara managed to stay on, but barely. Hope was crying now, terrified by the noise and motion. I know, baby, I know, Clara gasped. Just hold on. She'd almost gotten her bearings when Thomas appeared on the trail ahead of her. His face was twisted with rage and something uglier, humiliation at being made to chase after her. End of the line, he said. Get out of my way. You think you can just leave? You think that mountain man gives a damn about you? Thomas moved closer. He bought you, Clara. You're property to him. A transaction. He's more of a man than you'll ever be. He's a killer, a crazy hermit who's going to get himself shot, and then where will you be? Back in Red Hollow with everyone knowing you spread your legs for a coward and then shacked up with a murderer. Clara raised the rifle. I said get out of my way. Thomas laughed. You won't shoot me. You don't have it in you. You're right, Clara said. I won't shoot you. She shot his horse instead. The animal screamed and went down. Thomas barely managed to jump clear. By the time he got to his feet, Clara was gone, racing deeper into the forest. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from Thomas, from her father, from Red Hollow, and everything that wanted to drag her back into shame and silence. The trees opened up into a clearing. Clara pulled the horse to a stop, breathing hard. Hope was wailing now, and Clara's arms ached from holding her. We're okay, she whispered. We're gonna be okay. That's when she heard the other horses. They came from 3 directions: her father, Dutch Carver, and 2 of the ranch hands. She was surrounded. Claire looked around wildly. There was nowhere to run. The clearing was ringed by steep rocks on one side and dense forest on the others, and the men were closing in, cutting off every escape route. "Enough games," her father said. His face was red, his voice shaking with rage. "Get off that horse, now!" "No." "I said now." "And I said no." Claire's voice was steady, calmer than she felt. "I'm not going back. Not today. Not ever." "You ungrateful little. You think you have a choice? You think your bastard child gives you rights?" "She's not a bastard. She's my daughter, and she's got more worth than any of you." Dutch Carver spat. "This is touching and all, but I'm done playing. You're coming with us if we have to tie you to the saddle." He started forward. Clara raised the rifle. "Stay back." "What are you going to do? Shoot all of us? You got 1 bullet before we take you down." "Maybe, but that 1 bullet's going through you first." Dutch paused. Clara could see him calculating, wondering if she was bluffing. She wasn't. Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Clara!" Elias's voice rang out from the tree line. Everyone turned. He emerged from the forest, rifle in hand. Blood covered half his shirt, but his eyes were clear and focused, and he wasn't alone. Behind him came Sheriff Hayes and 2 deputies, all armed. "Sheriff," Martin said, surprise and confusion crossing his face. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping a kidnapping," Hayes said. His voice was hard. "You and your boys rode onto Vaughn's land with intent to take Mrs. Vaughn against her will." "Mrs. Vaughn?" Clara's father sputtered. "She ain't married to him." "Actually," Elias said, pulling a piece of paper from his coat, "she is. Got the certificate right here. We were married by Circuit Judge Morrison 3 weeks ago. Legal and binding." Clara stared at him. They'd done no such thing. This was a bluff. A lie to... Then Elias looked at her, and she understood. He was giving her a choice. He was offering her a way out that even the law would have to respect. "That's impossible," Thomas said. "She was pregnant with my child." "The child is mine," Elias interrupted. "Clara and I were involved before you even met her. You just thought you were first." "That's a damned lie." "Can you prove it?" Sheriff Hayes asked. "Can you prove that child isn't Vaughn's? Because from where I'm standing, you're a man who abandoned a pregnant woman and now you're trying to forcibly take another man's wife." Thomas's face went purple, but he couldn't speak. There was no way to prove Hope's parentage, no way to prove anything. "This is ridiculous," Martin blustered. "She's my daughter." "She's a grown woman who made a legal marriage," Hayes said. "Now you got 2 choices. You can leave peaceful-like, or I can arrest all of you for attempted kidnapping, trespassing, and assault. Your call." The men looked at each other. Dutch Carver still had murder in his eyes, but even he could see the math. The sheriff and 2 deputies, plus Elias, plus Clara herself with her rifle. Against 4 of them, with 2 already dead or wounded back on the trail. "This ain't over," Dutch said. "Yeah, it is," Elias replied. "You come after my wife again, I won't wait for the law. I'll handle it myself. We clear?" Dutch's jaw worked, but he nodded. He turned his horse and rode off. The ranch hands followed. Only Martin Whitlock remained. He looked at Clara with something ugly and broken in his face. "You're dead to me," he said. "I've been dead to you since Mother died," Clara replied quietly. "Maybe longer, so take your pride and your shame and your hate and get off this mountain, and don't ever come back." Her father stared at her for a long moment. Then he spat in the dirt and rode away without another word. The silence after he left was deafening. Sheriff Hayes cleared his throat. "You folks all right?" "We're fine," Elias said, but he swayed slightly on his feet. Clara dismounted quickly, hope still clutched to her chest. "He's hurt. He needs a doctor." "There's one in my camp," Hayes said. "We'll get him fixed up, and then you and I need to have a conversation about this marriage certificate, Vaughan. It's real enough. I saw Morrison last week. He didn't mention marrying anyone." "Must have slipped his mind." Hayes actually smiled. "Must have. Well, I suppose if you 2 want to make it real, I'm authorized to perform the ceremony, seeing as how you've already told half the territory you're married." Clara looked at Elias. He looked at her. Hope chose that moment to let out a wail that said she was done with all this nonsense and wanted to eat. Can we discuss this after we stop him from bleeding to death? Clara asked. Fair point, Hayes said. They made camp right there in the clearing. The sheriff's doctor, a grizzled old man who'd seen worse, cleaned and stitched Elias's wound while Clara fed Hope and tried to stop shaking. Bullet went clean through, the doctor said. He's lucky. Another inch to the left and we'd be burying him. I'm right here, Elias muttered. You can stop talking about me like I'm dead. You almost were, you stubborn fool. What possessed you to take on 6 armed men alone? They had my family. The word hung in the air. Family. That's what he'd called them. The doctor finished his work and left Clara alone with Elias. Hope had fallen asleep against Clara's chest, exhausted from all the chaos. You lied to the sheriff, Clara said quietly. Yeah. We're not married. Not legally, no. But you told them we were. It was the only way to make them back off. Legal claim trumps a father's rights, especially when that father sold his daughter in the first place. Clara looked at him, at the bandages wrapped around his torso, at the exhaustion carved into his face, at the man who'd fought 6 men to protect her. Why? She asked. You know why. I want to hear you say it. Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because you're mine. Not in the way your father thinks, not in the way I bought you, but in every way that matters. You're mine and I'm yours, and that baby sleeping against your heart is ours. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take my family away. Tears burned Clara's eyes. That's the most words I've ever heard you say at once. Don't get used to it. She laughed. It came out shaky and half broken, but it was real. Sheriff Hayes said he could marry us for real, if we wanted. Do you want? Clara thought about it, really thought. About Thomas's promises that meant nothing. About her father's version of love that came with conditions and shame. About all the things marriage was supposed to be and never had been in her experience. Then she thought about Elias. About locked doors and rifle lessons, about stitching wounds and delivering babies, about carved toys and quiet vigils, about a man who gave her choices instead of commands. Yeah, she said, I want. Elias's face did something complicated, relief and fear and hope all tangled together. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. I can't give you much. Can't give you town life or society or any of the things. I don't want those things. I want a home. I want safety. I want someone who sees me as more than a mistake to be corrected or a shame to be hidden. She shifted Hope in her arms. I want what we've already built. I just want to make it real. It's already real. Then let's make it legal too. Sheriff Hayes married them right there in the clearing with the deputies as witnesses. It wasn't romantic. Clara was covered in trail dust and breast milk. Elias was bandaged and bleeding through his shirt. Hope woke up halfway through and started fussing. But when Hayes said, You may kiss your bride, and Elias leaned in careful and gentle, Clara thought it was the most perfect moment of her life. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Vaughan, Elias said against her lips. Took you long enough to make it official, Clara replied. They rode back to this cabin together, the sheriff and his men escorting them to make sure there was no more trouble. At the cabin door, Hayes tipped his hat. You folks need anything? You send word. And Vaughan, try to avoid killing people. Makes my job easier. I'll do my best. After they left, Clara and Elias stood in the doorway looking at their home. It looked different now. Not like a shelter or a hiding place, but like what it was. A beginning. You think they'll come back? Clara asked. Your father? Maybe. Dutch? Probably not. Thomas? Elias shrugged. I think he's got the message. And if they do, then we deal with it. Together. Clara nodded. That was enough. That had always been enough. The seasons turned. Summer came, and with it the hard work of keeping a homestead running. Clara learned to garden, to preserve food, to handle the animals. Hope grew like a weed, getting bigger and stronger every day. By her first birthday, she was walking, getting into everything, demanding attention with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm. She's got your personality, Elias observed one afternoon. He was teaching Hope to stack wooden blocks while Clara prepared dinner. "She's got your stubbornness," Clara countered. "That's all you. We could argue about this, or you could accept that she got the worst of both of us." Elias smiled. He did that more now. Not often, but enough that Clara had stopped being surprised by it. That fall, a lawyer came up from Red Hollow. Clara's father had died. Heart gave out, the lawyer said. He'd left everything to the church except for one thing, a letter addressed to Clara. She didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear whatever justification or condemnation he'd written from beyond the grave. "You don't have to read it," Elias said. "I know." But she did anyway. Stood on the porch while Hope played at her feet, and Elias chopped wood nearby and opened the letter her father had left. It was short, only a few lines. "I never knew how to love you after your mother died. I suppose I never tried. You deserved better than I gave you. I hope you found it." That was all. No apology, no blessing, just acknowledgement that he'd failed and a small hope that she'd succeeded without him. Clara folded the letter and put it in the fire. Watched it burn to ash. "You okay?" Elias asked. "Yeah, I am." And she was. Her father's approval or forgiveness didn't matter anymore. She'd built a life without it, built something better than anything he could have given her. Winter came again. Their second winter together, though it felt like they'd been living this way forever. The cabin was warmer this year. Elias had reinforced the walls, added insulation. They had more food stored, more wood stacked. They were prepared. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the fire while Hope played with the toys Elias had carved. She had a whole collection now. Horses, bears, birds, even a tiny wooden house. "I got you something," Clara said. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." She handed him a shirt she'd made. Simple, practical, but stitched with care. On the inside of the collar, she'd embroidered their initials. EV and CV intertwined. Elias ran his fingers over the stitching. His eyes were suspiciously bright. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "It's just a shirt." "No, it's not." He pulled something from his pocket. A necklace made of polished wood, carved into the shape of a mountain peak. He'd been working on it for months, she realized. All those nights she'd seen him whittling by the fire. He fastened it around her neck. The wood was warm from his pocket, smooth under her fingers. "So you always know where home is," he said. Clara kissed him, long and slow and full of everything she couldn't say. When they pulled apart, Hope was tugging on Elias's pant leg, demanding to be picked up. He lifted her easily, settling her on his hip. She grabbed his face with both hands and babbled something that might have been papa or might have been nonsense. Didn't matter. The meaning was clear. "Think she knows what day it is?" Clara asked. "Nah, but she knows she's loved. That's better than Christmas." They sat together by the fire, the three of them, while snow fell outside and the wind howled through the pines. And Clara thought about the auction block, about standing there with her hands tied, believing her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life hadn't ended that day. It had begun. Spring arrived with mud and wildflowers. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the rider coming up the trail. Her hand went to the rifle propped nearby. Old habits died hard. But then she recognized the horse, Sheriff Hayes. Elias emerged from the barn, also reaching for his gun. But Hayes held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. "Just bringing news," he called out. "Nothing bad?" Clara relaxed slightly. "What kind of news?" Hayes dismounted and accepted the water Elias offered. "Wanted to let you folks know Dutch Carver left the territory. Got himself in trouble down in Silver Creek, took off in the middle of the night. Word is he's headed to California. Don't think he'll be coming back." "And Thomas?" Clara asked. "Married some girl from Davenport. Her father owns the mill. They moved east, from what I hear." Clara felt nothing. Not relief, not anger, nothing. Thomas was a stranger now, a name attached to nothing that mattered. "That it?" Elias asked. "One more thing." Hayes pulled out a document. "Judge Morrison wanted me to file this. It's an official adoption decree. Makes Hope legally yours, Vorn. Both of you. Father and mother listed right here." Clara's breath caught. "But Thomas? Thomas signed away his rights before he left. Said he wanted a fresh start. Didn't want the past following him. Hayes shrugged. I suspect his new father-in-law had something to do with that decision, but either way, the girl's yours now, legal and binding. He handed the paper to Clara. She stared at it, at their names written in official script. Elias and Clara Vaughan, parents of Hope Sarah Vaughan. You gave her Sarah as a middle name, say? Clara asked. Elias looked embarrassed. I thought she should have it, if that's okay. It's more than okay. After Hayes left, Clara held the paper like it was made of glass. She's really ours. She was always ours. I know, but now no one can say different. No one can come back and try to take her. Elias pulled Clara close, careful of the paper in her hands. No one was ever going to take her. I'd have fought the whole damn territory first. I know, but it's nice not to have to. Hope came running out of the cabin, chasing a butterfly. She was 2 now, full of energy and opinions. She had Clara's hair and Thomas's eyes, but when she laughed, it sounded like home. Mama, Papa, she pointed at the butterfly. Look! I see it, baby, Clara called back. Hope giggled and ran after the butterfly, her small legs pumping. She fell down, got back up, kept going. Stubborn as her mother, resilient as her father. Clara watched her daughter play and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the knowledge that everything she'd survived had been worth it for this moment, for this life, for this family they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and will and the refusal to let the world break them. You happy? Elias asked. Clara thought about it, about the cabin in the mountains, about the man standing beside her who'd given her choices instead of demands, about the daughter playing in the wildflowers who would never know shame or judgment for how she came into this world. Yeah, she said. I am. Good. That's all I wanted. They stood there together, watching Hope chase butterflies under the spring sun, while the mountains rose up around them like walls against the world. And Clara thought about all the ways a life could start and end. How sometimes the moment that was supposed to destroy you became the moment that saved you. How sometimes the darkest roads led to the brightest clearings. She'd been sold like cattle, abandoned by everyone who was supposed to protect her, left to stand alone on an auction block while a town decided her worth. But she'd survived. More than that, she'd won. She'd found a home, found safety, found love in the most unlikely place with the most unlikely person. She'd raised a daughter who would grow up free and wild and strong. She'd built something that no one could take away because it belonged to her in ways that had nothing to do with laws or papers or the opinions of small-minded people. Mama! Hope ran back to them, holding out a flower she'd picked. It was crushed from her enthusiastic grip, petals falling. For you! Clara took it and tucked it behind her ear. Thank you, baby. It's beautiful. Hope beamed. Then she was off again, chasing after something new, because the world was big and she wanted to see all of it. She's going to be a handful when she's older, Elias observed. She already is. Fair point. Clara leaned into him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stood like that while the sun climbed higher and Hope's laughter echoed through the clearing and the mountains kept their ancient watch. This was home. This was family. This was everything worth fighting for. And Clara Vaughan, no longer Whitlock, never Garrett, knew that no matter what came next, she could handle it. Because she'd already survived the worst the world could throw at her. Everything else was just living. Years later, when Hope was grown and Clara's hair had threads of gray and Elias moved a little slower but his eyes were still sharp, they'd sit on that same porch and remember. Remember the auction block and the blood on the cabin floor and the storm that trapped them and the moment their daughter was born. Remember all the times they almost didn't make it but did anyway. And Hope would sit with them, maybe with children of her own by then, and ask about the beginning, ask how they found each other, ask how they built this life. And Clara would look at Elias, and he'd look at her, and they'd smile. Because the story of how they saved each other was also the story of how they refused to be erased, how they took all the shame and fear and judgment the world tried to bury them under and turned it into something fierce and bright and enduring. We survived, Clara would say simply, and then we lived. That was enough. That had always been enough, and it always would be. The girl they tried to erase had become the woman who couldn't be broken, and the man who saved her had found his own salvation in the saving. Together, they'd built something the world said was impossible. They'd built hope, and called her their daughter, and lived the kind of life that proved sometimes, against all odds, love was stronger than shame, and family was more than blood, and home was wherever you chose to fight for it. The mountains kept their watch. The seasons turned, and in a cabin far from the judgment of Red Hollow, a family lived and loved and proved that some stories don't end in tragedy. Some stories end in triumph. This was one of them.